What up, guys? It's Josiah here, and today we're reading Red Kayak, Chapter 4. Let's begin. I was running so fast, I practically slipped and fell off the dock. "Wait!" Dad hollered. Tilly was barking at my heels, and it was hard to hear. My father rushed up behind me and handed me his cell phone. "I've got the radio on my boat." I took the phone and pushed it in my pocket of my parka. Then both Dad and I jumped into our boats on either side of the dock. "Go on!" I shouted at Tilly, because she was tap dancing at the edge of the dock, getting ready to jump in, and I didn't want her to come. In the pickup, on the way home from school, Dad had told me to check the smaller creeks off the river. He said he and their other rescue workers would head downstream with the currents toward the bay, the most likely course the kayak had taken. It made sense because Dad and the others had radar and searchlights on their boats. If anyone was found, Dad told me, we should go to the marina at Rock Hall where an ambulance was waiting. Mid-morning by then, but it was dark because of the approaching storm. Everything seemed gray. The sky, the water, the air, and all of it pressed in on me as I pulled the brim of my cap down tight and yanked the cord to start my motor. While it warmed up, I untied the lines that kept my skiff snug in its slip. When the boat was free, I sat on the stern, pushed the gear lever to reverse, accelerated a little with the turn of my hand on the outboat's handle, and I turned around backward to see where I was going. As I did, I heard a hard thump in the bow of the boat bounce forward. I swung my head back to see Tilly landed awkwardly in the tiny space at the front of my skiff. "Hey!" I yelled at her. With precision, she hopped over the front seat and sat like an obedient soldier mid-boat, where there was more room. She barked once as though to tell me, "So there now, shut up." So I did. If she wanted to go along that badly, there wasn't much I could do. I certainly didn't want to waste time pulling back and forcing her out. Switching gears to forward, I headed out full throttle, just as fast as my skiff could go. The wind was a sheet of ice against my face and blew the dog's ears straight back. My hands were cold too. Damn cold for April. I wish I'd brought gloves. I was ahead of my father, but not for long. Pretty soon he had the Miss Amanda passing me on the right. His workboat was 3 times the size of my skiff, and twice as fast. He waved to me from the dog house up front, where I could see him adjusting the radar and already picking up the radio receiver. I waved back. Then Dad headed to the starboat, while I veered opposite toward the left bank in the creek. Already my eyes were scanning the shoreline for the red kayak, or a splash of yellow. Mr. D'Angelo had told the police he couldn't remember what clothes his wife or son wore that morning, but he knew they had on yellow life jackets. I felt excited, but a little panicked too, as I sped down the creek, squinting into the icy spray and scanning the thick tangle of brown bush and newly budding trees along the narrow shoreline. If that red kayak was out there, I wanted to be the one to find it. Soon I could see Dad entering the river. He was far enough ahead that I couldn't read the words Miss Amanda painted on his stern. I didn't know what made me think of it then, maybe the panic, but I recalled the morning my sister died. The Miss Amanda is named for my sister. Most workbouts get named for mothers or grandmothers, but my sister was the first girl born to the Parks family in 2 generations. And while it's true, she was only an infant when she died, she was old enough to smile, and we were all nuts about her. I used to make a goo-goo face that got her so excited she wheeled her arms and legs around like a windmill. After we lost Amanda, my mother couldn't sleep in the house and went to stay with my grandmother in Connecticut. She kept promising she would come home soon, but almost half a year went by before she did. So for a long time it was just Dad and me. That's the reason I spent so much time with Carl, because Dad had to work Fridays and Saturdays all winter on Miss Fuller's oyster boat, and Mr. Fuller wouldn't allow kids on board. Carl was training then with an ambulance crew in Annapolis over the bridge. I even slept at the firehouse with him because he worked 24-hour shifts. They were nice to me there. I liked the whole platoon. They gave me my own locker, and just like them, I taped up snapshots of my family inside the metal door. I had a picture of my rabbit and another one of my dad and mom getting hugged by a giant chocolate kiss at Hershey Park. I had a whole pile of comic books and an old Game Boy in there too. Just stuff so I could be like the firefighters and paramedics. They never seemed to mind having a kid hang around with them. I was pretty quiet, and I even helped out some, like picking up trash and emptying the ashtrays. I cooked for them too. I learned how to cook early because I was alone so much, and I was an expert on macaroni and cheese from the box. I'd stand up on the chair when the pot of water on the 12-burner gas stove was boiling. I'd dump in 8, 9, 10 boxes of macaroni at a time and stir it with a big wooden spoon. The rest of the time, I hung out and read my comic books or watched TV, or went out back to the pen where I threw the ball for Jake, their bomb dog. But sometimes there was room in the ambulance. There wasn't room there. Sorry, but sometimes when there was room in the ambulance, Carl and the others let me ride along in the seat behind the driver. I had to stay out of the way and be quiet, but that was easy, and that's where I learned a lot of emergency stuff. Weird how this memory flashed through my mind as I raced the boat down the creek and into the river, my eyes sweeping back and forth across the water, looking for Ben and his mom. I saw that the ospreys were back, arranging sticks on channel markers for their gigantic nest, and I saw some terns feeding over the sandbar, but nothing else. The motor hummed steadily, the wake behind my boat, peeling away from both sides of the motor in streaks of white, green, and gray foamy water. Not too far downstream, a small creek emptied in from the left. As my father's boat disappeared around the bend up ahead, I reluctantly turned my boat up the creek, slowed down some, and kept searching. The bow of the boat settled down, and the wake from behind sloshed up against the transom. Still nothing. Why would there be? Common sense and knowing the currents would tell you that the kayak had drifted downstream, especially with the fast-running spring tides, unless Mrs. D'Angelo had intentionally paddled up one of the creeks. There was no way they would have drifted here. God, I was cold. It started to drizzle, and the water froze on my face. I shoved my left hand under my thigh to try and keep it warm. Then I cussed out loud at myself because I hadn't called out when I saw that red kayak. I was thinking that Ben was probably freezing too, and scared to death by now. I know what being really cold is like. Middle of winter, I almost drowned in a cow pond when I was little, maybe 8. JT, Digger, and I were playing ice hockey, and I fell clear through the ice. The memory of that accident made me shudder absurdly. I leaned over to cut off the engine. "Mrs. D'Angelo," I hollered at the top of my lungs. "Ben, can you hear me?" Nothing. "Mrs. D'Angelo?" Not a sound. I fired up the engine again and kept going up the creek. A couple private docks extended out into the water. There was a long strip of riprap there near the construction site. From that point on, it was just shoreline with trees and a lot of brown sailbush. I kept going, but toward the head of the creek, a marsh taken over by a patch of tall parnogers warned of shallow water, and I turned the boat around, not wanting to run aground. I sped up and then came back down the creek, closer to the opposite bank. Still no sign of a red kayak or a yellow life jacket. All I wanted to do was open the throttle and head down river to where the others were searching. My hands ached. They were so cold. I stuffed one hand in my pocket and hit the cell phone. I pulled it out and saw that I had one missed call. Turning off the motor so I could hear. I speed dialed home to see if Mom knew anything. "Brady, hi," she said. "Dad called. He said they found Mrs. D'Angelo." "They did?" "Yes, downriver near Spaniard's Neck." "Is she okay?" I asked. "She's alive," Mom said, "but just barely. They have not found Ben." "They didn't?" "No, they lost the kayak, Brady, so Ben is out there somewhere in the water in his life jacket." "Oh man, it's cold, Mom." I know it's cold. Are you alright? Can you do this, Brady?" I'm right I'm fine, I assured her. I need to keep looking. I ended the call and put the phone back in my pocket. We had to move really fast now. If Ben was in the water, his time was limited. Tilly started barking as I picked up speed. "Quiet!" I hollered. I wondered if I should waste my time going up any of these little creeks and inlets now that they had found Mrs. D'Angelo downriver. But Tilly was barking up a storm, and I stood with her nose pointed toward the river bank, where some of the water curled like a small cove. It was hard to ignore Tilly's instincts. Once she barked at the ceiling in our basement so incessantly that my father pulled down part of the insulation and found a possum's nest made out of leaves. "Better not be a squirrel or something stupid like that," I grumbled as I swung the boat toward the cove. I bit my lip uncertainly. Suddenly, Tilly had her front paw on the edge of my boat. Her tail thumped back and forth, hitting my knees. "What is it, Till?" I asked, squinting to see through the drizzle. I slowed down the motor as we approached the narrow channel to the cove. Tall marsh grass obscured my view to the right, but as soon as we had motored around it, I glimpsed the remains of an old dock, a place where J.T. Digger and I used to fish, in a single bright spot of yellow. Hope you guys enjoyed this chapter. If you guys did, to leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye, guys!